Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Educational Triage. This week we have Curt Richards, and we are talking about 30 insights for new teachers to thrive. Hey, Curt, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you
Oh,
doing, Tony?
I'm doing just great. Hey, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and why you wrote this book?
Okay, well, I am from the upstate of South Carolina. I'm sure you can't tell by my accent. And I attended many years ago, attended Clemson University, and I studied animal agriculture and wildlife biology. I had no plans to teach. And when I was in classes where we had to do presentations, people would tell me, "Oh, you ought to teach. You ought to be a teacher." And my response was, "No way." Well, this September will be my 40th year teaching somewhere. So obviously, I eventually went to it and loved it, and became my career and my life. So basically, I after I've been teaching in public school for 28 years, and then teaching at a private massage school, teaching anatomy for 12 years, I decided during that time to pass on some of the things that I've learned, things that I've picked up as far as teaching, to not only teaching techniques, but ways to think about teaching and your students. And so that's when I started scribbling down some thoughts and kind of started deciding to put it into what I eventually call insights rather than chapters. Each insight is a couple of pages in the book that will guide people in certain areas, so it's not something that's extremely lengthy that you have to sit down, take a lot of your time to read. So that was one of my goals, is to make it quick and easy and to the point, and leave out a lot of educational jargon. And just, if you're in the classroom, especially if you're starting in the classroom, these are some situations that you're going to be faced with. And it's not just practical guidance for maneuvering all the everyday issues such as behavior, but it's also ways to reach students, ways to think about students' minds and how they learn. So I kind of wanted to go in that direction as well. I bring in some brain science, and this is what happens in our brain when we study certain things. So I believe it's something that's an advantage to K through 12 and beyond. You can find something, even though I was a science teacher in middle school and high school, and then post school, but I think you could apply these insights to any grade level.
And it is a quick read.
Yes,
And it's almost something that maybe you want to read first thing in the morning and think about and use it for the rest of the day,
I
or
would
maybe
think
at the
so.
beginning of the week and use it maybe as an exercise to see how you
Absolutely.
can do.
I think so. I think that if someone had this book with them in the classroom, that when they have a spare moment, if those do exist in teaching, to be able to look up something and get a little idea about how to maybe handle an issue that's come up.
And it feels a little it's down to earth. And it
Well,
feels it's sort of common sense in many ways
oh, absolutely.
when you think about it, but it's put forth in such a straightforward fashion that it gives you're able to think around it as opposed to trying to dig in and do all this. I don't know. You don't have to chew it really hard in order to
Right.
get what you need.
And that's kind of what I meant by the educational jargon, so to speak, which I'm not
Right.
knocking educational classes, but sometimes we get too much into our vocabulary and go too deep. And it's just, this is what you're going to be faced with, and these are some ideas on how to deal with it. And that might be classroom issues, it might be administration, it might be how to deal with parents, and not. I'm not making it like it's a negative thing, like all these bad things are going to happen. No, ways that you can reach students and ways you can get parents involved to help you in the ways that you can deal with all the administrative overload sometimes it happens.
So, who was your audience? Obviously, first-time teachers or
Yes.
novice teachers, but would you say that this is were you also writing for teachers just to kind of take a step back and have a little bit of a refresher course?
I think yes. I think both. First thing I think about was I trained during my career, officially trained 13 practice teachers from college, and then I mentored several teachers throughout my career. So I look at it if somebody is going into teaching, they're still in college and they haven't gotten their first job. This would be an excellent book for them. But also your first year, first 1, 2, 3 years. We always say that the first year you kind of go through and do the best you can. Second year you correct what you screwed up the first year, and then the third year you're kind of sailing a little bit better. So anywhere in that. However, if any teacher feels like they're feeling uh, almost like going toward burnout, or maybe they're feeling just like they need a little more of incentive. I think any teacher, I don't care if you've been teaching 15 years, could read some of these chapters and definitely agree with them, reinforce what they're doing to something. It's kind of like a pat on the back. Hey, I'm doing that. So, you know, but I also think that this is be excellent for administrators to read to understand some of the um, day-to-day processes that teachers have to face. I know administrators have been teachers, but sometimes you only have to be a teacher for like 3 years or so, and then you go into administration. And after a while, you kind of forget because you're dealing with it from a different perspective. So I think it would be excellent for administrators to sit down and read through a few chapters.
Or even maybe to make it an exercise for them to go through with the teachers?
Oh, absolutely. They could just buy a book for every teacher in the school and we'd all be happy.
Do you think that this book addresses the holistic training for teachers or the holistic need for teachers in that you're going for a complete sort of diagnostic or training of teachers where they are becoming a whole person and it's not just do this, do that?
Oh yes, yes, definitely. It's not just and that's the way the book is, but also teaching is not. Even though teachers are list makers and they like to check off the list, it's not okay. I did this today, now I do this today. Now I've been a good teacher. No, I think I said in the beginnings of this, if I could just read a couple sentences
That'd be
from
great.
this. It says you can study and apply all the brain science that research has to offer. You can sit in college classes and professional workshops and take volumes of notes about how to organize a classroom and how to present material. You can read 100 how to books on teaching and classroom management. You can scour the internet and read all the teacher blogs available. You can even construct your lesson plans so that they correspond perfectly with the state standards. But if you don't love what you do and love what you're teaching and love who you're teaching, then you will never be a highly effective teacher, and the classroom is probably not the place for you that you should be. So I think the foundation is to truly in your heart love what you're doing and love who you're this in front of you, and to love the subject matter or the grade level that you're teaching. That's the foundation, and then everything else builds from there. Now, it's not just that. A lot of teachers probably, oh, I love all these little kids, but then they don't prepare. No, it's just like a house. You've got a foundation, but you have to build on top of that. But if you
Right.
don't have the proper foundation, and so I think from that spreads out into all areas of your life, not just when
Mhm.
you walk in the classroom.
Did you put these in order of importance or
Not really, no. I kinda put them in order of how they came out of my head, you know, to be honest with you. I sorta did. I mean, it wasn't absolutely planned that way, but looking at the, chapters, the first few chapters are kind of about things, classroom management tools. I'll just look at a couple of in them. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but all the insights. The first one is monitor and adjust. Okay, to be able
Mhm.
to make changes. The next one is classroom management rules and corrections. So one of the first things that students are to do is to, of course, introduce, and then these are the rules of this classroom, and then teaching to various learning styles. So you're going to have a lot of students in there that, that are learn different ways, and they want to
Right.
learn, but they you've got to come at it the right way.
Let me jump in really
Jump in.
quick.
Yes.
The second one that you had,
Okay.
which was
Classroom
the
management.
rules,
Yes.
how important do you think it is for the students to maybe sit down and come up with a set of rules?
Oh, I think that's an excellent idea. I've actually done that before, where I would say, okay, on a sheet of, and this was for middle school and high school. Now I don't know,
Mhm.
this may not apply for first grade, but you could just do it as a just talking to everybody. What do you think classroom rules should be? These students know how to respond in a classroom. As I've told many practice teachers, you're going to have students that's got, like, if you're a 10th grade teacher, you're going to have students that's got 11, at least 11 years practice of giving teachers hard time. So they're excellent at what they do. So you have to just expect that. But I think, number one, I would always tell my students that there's really one rule: don't do anything that interferes with my teaching, and don't do anything that interferes with somebody's learning. And then I would underscore that with respect. Respect me, respect your fellow students. That doesn't mean you have to agree with me. You can come up and talk to me, as long as you can do it in a respectful manner. You can disagree all day long with anything that I have to say, but don't interfere with what I'm trying to do here, and let don't interfere with another student's learning. So from that is like the foundation, and then we would come up with specifics. I try not to inundate rules, 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 rules.
Right.
Now, yeah, in my case, I taught laboratory sciences, so we did have to have specific safety rules in the laboratory. One of my favorite was that hot glass looks just like cold glass. you know, so students would, grab a hot beaker and burn themselves. So there's got to be, if you're a PE teacher, you've got to have specific rules, and most of that goes from safety as well as just dealing with large numbers of people. But yeah, I think that having some ideas, I've gotten some good ideas from students before. It's amazing how, when you ask them, especially teenagers, tell me rules, what if you were going to make a list of rules, what would they be? And they start reading them to you. It's just amazing how much they know how to respond and act in the classroom.
See, I've used it as a way to figure out what the dynamics are of the students that I have. So
Right.
I have them partner up or
Oh,
maybe go
absolutely.
into small groups, and
Hmm.
I put them into the groups and I just kind of watch them, because by the time I had them, many of them already knew each other, and some of them
Oh,
had
yes.
been with each other for maybe 11, maybe some of them maybe even 12 years. And so it's really interesting to watch them. But the fundamental component and foundation that they always come up with is respect. Respect for
Absolutely.
self, respect for others. Because if you don't respect yourself, then you're not going to respect anybody else. And
Exactly.
sometimes students really need to learn how to respect themselves, because they don't get it outside of school.
Hmm. And sometimes they
And
don't expect to be respected.
right.
You know.
So that there in itself can be the basis for why you might end up having some big management problems with them.
Exactly.
So you then know, okay, this is going to be a project where I need to work with this one.
Absolutely. Well, too, it's interesting you talking about the students making up the rules or giving you ideas. Also, I'd ask them, add to that consequences. What if somebody does not follow this rule or these rules? And the funny thing is, I found that they were generally tougher on consequences than I would have been. So
Mhm.
and that's an area where teachers have to consider consequences and how lenient they're going to be or how strict they're going to be, and they have to realize that not every situation requires the exact same consequence. I know a lot of
Right.
people say, "Oh, you got to be across the board," but students aren't totally across the board. Situations are not across the board, so you have to be flexible.
Sometimes all it needs is a slight correction, and many times I ask the students, I toss
Hmm.
it back to the students.
Oh
So if
yes,
somebody is doing this, what is your responsibility
right.
as opposed to what is my responsibility? So
Hmm.
if we're working and you're all working and this one's off task, how do you redirect them? And students are
Exactly.
so programmed to think that the teacher is the one who's really in charge. And
Hmm.
no, the
No.
teacher is kind of like the shepherd and the sheep, or maybe you have a pack of dogs. Dogs will self correct, they will
Oh
correct
yeah.
each other,
Oh, absolutely.
and other animals will as well. So, and I don't, well, sometimes we refer to our students as little critters, but it starts to empower them and it gives them the autonomy, I think, in learning that it's
Hmm.
okay to say something to somebody as opposed to snitching.
Absolutely, yeah. And I found too that correction that when somebody does something against rules, etc., that I use correction as a learning tool. It's
Hmm.
not just a punishment. It is a correction and find some way that they can learn something out of that correction. Now, obviously, there's going to be some extenuating circumstances where somebody has to go to an administrator or something of that nature, obviously. But the more I think administrators will appreciate teachers that can handle their own problems, their own issues the best they
Right,
can.
right. And sometimes the action by the student is for some reason a need for negative attention.
Oh, absolutely.
It's a
Yeah.
cry for attention. And sometimes I'll address that and I'll
Hmm.
say, why do you need so much attention today? How would you
Hmm.
like me to give you the attention? Do you want it positive or negative today?
Yeah,
Let's
that's
work on
true.
that.
And
And
sometimes, if I could share a quick
sure,
story,
please.
I had a student in my high school class that was kind of a character, and I had a large fish tank that was about a 55-gallon tank with a couple fish in there. And he, for various reasons, he put some candy in there so that the whole fish tank turned red. Now, it didn't hurt the fish, fortunately, but something needed to be done. He thought that was all funny. Well, of course, I gave him a choice. I could write this up in an official way to administrator, and he had been in some trouble before, so he didn't really want that. Or you can come after school and you can clean my tank. I gave him that choice. And so he'd say,
Hmm.
"I'll come after school." Well, he came and he had to pump. It took him a good hour and a half or so. He pumped out all the water, took the fish out, cleaned all the rocks. He did everything, put it back, made it pristine. And he was proud of himself. And I talked to him about what this means and that means. And the funny thing was, the next day or so, when anybody went near that fish tank, he would go over there. "You better leave that alone." It was all of a sudden he became the guardian of the fish tank, and he learned something. And so the correction was taken care of without it being a negative punishment.
Right. It's what we would call restorative justice in many ways.
Oh, absolutely. So that's kind of what you look for. You don't have to make a big blown out issue about every little thing that somebody does. But
Hmm.
like you said, you give them the attention they need, but in a positive way. Sometimes that's all they need. It's just to be seen. They want to just know that they exist.
Now, some teachers find themselves absolutely, I don't know, wound up.
Yes.
And so something like that might make them shoot off. So, what are some of the insights that you have for self care? So that, because it's very difficult when you have a group of students who need so much from you, but you need to be able to refill your own vessel
Right.
before you can distribute parts of that out. So I know that you have things in there. I know that you have routines. What else do you have that our listeners might want to use, let's say,
So this would kind of be
or look
along the
for?
line of them heading toward what people love to call burnout, I guess you could say, or at
Right.
least exhaustion. Several things come to mind that may not be. Some of it is directly in the classroom, but most of it is stuff that can be done outside the classroom. Part of it can be teachers can reach a point of boredom where they're teaching the same course, the same thing over and over. Now, every school has extra things that they expect, committees, etc., they expect teachers to be involved in. And they tend to put people into areas of the same area. If you're a science teacher, you'll become the person taking care of the science department or whatever. I found that since you're going to have to be doing extra work anyway with that, find something totally different from what you do. Example was I was a science teacher, but due to various reasons, I became the director of the school plays. And partly because my daughter was in the plays, etc., and I became the drama dad. Well, anyway, the long story, but I became the director. I wound up directing 7 plays. The good thing was it was refreshing. It was another artistic outlet. So if the people can find some kind of artistic outlet that's maybe different from what they're doing every day, that gives them a little, that refreshes them a little. I think within the school, try to avoid toxic environments such as, and I'm being very general here, but the teacher's lounge. That can just be a place where negativity, it's just in the air. So try to stay away from that sort of environment, and seek out fellow teachers who are positive and interested in improving what they do. I think that too, outside of school, you have to unplug. You have to kind of know this is enough. I've done enough today. I'm not going to do this weekend. I'm going to take Friday night off, whatever it might be. Unplug, get off of social media, whatever. I mean, that's my personal opinion. Some people that may be their outlet, but and and do things with that is emotionally and physically positive. Exercise, obviously, eating right, this sort of thing, but you need to get your brain out of survival mode. Too often our brain gets in and we just feel like the sympathetic nervous system kicks in, and everything is in survival mode. So socialize, but also have me time. And that means different things to different people. To me, it meant going out into the forest a little bit by myself, hiking, sitting by a stream, whatever, to kind of collect yourself and just unplug from what you're doing, and then you can come back and plug back in.
What about the teachers that, let's say that they go, go, go,
Hmm.
and they go to sleep, and then when they wake up, they basically jump out of bed, jump in the shower, jump out, grab maybe a piece of toast or a cup of coffee on their way, and they're bam right back into the school.
Right.
And
Well,
they've had no time really. to
Hmm.
actually get themselves together.
Exactly.
So,
That's. I think we have more choices than we want to admit we have. Now I realize if you've got two or three young children and then you've got to do that, you take care of them. You got, there's situations, but everybody can sit down with a pad and pencil maybe and say, okay, how am I going? What do I really have to do? Can I possibly get up 20 minutes earlier and sit on the back porch with a cup of coffee for 10 minutes? I mean, uh, there are choices. It's just we tend to slide into the same old habits, and that's what it's a matter of breaking habits, in my
mhm.
opinion. And I think all of a sudden we start to see that we're more refreshed. Get to school. I used to love to get to school. We started school. I think it was something like 8:10 or 8:15 was when the bell rang. I would get to school at least an hour early. I loved to go in that classroom when nobody was in there. And I would get me a cup of coffee or something, and I would be doing stuff, but I would do it on my own time, my own way. And I didn't feel uh, rushed or like that I had to deal with a whole bunch of people. And because I was going to be around hundreds of people all day long, I needed some me time. So I got there early, you know.
And the nice part about that, because I did the same thing, I would wake up very early in the morning. I would think I was getting up at about between 3 and 3:30,
Ooh.
and then I would take the dogs for a walk. I would do some
Hmm.
meditation time. I would do a small workout, eat breakfast, and then I would drive into work. And I had the place to myself, and I could just
Exactly.
close my door and I could just get work done. You need to have that alone time just to be able to process and get your thoughts together.
Exactly. Yeah, and it would take a little adjustment. As we always say, you can't have it all, and you can't stay up to after midnight looking at your phone or grading papers or whatever, and then expect to get up at 6 o'clock and sit on the back porch and drink a cup of coffee. So you've got to
Right.
it's, it's give and take.
You have to set some really strict boundaries, I think.
Yeah, and it gets to be
And
a habit. To break a habit, you can start with new habits.
now, how does that translate into the classroom? Because of late, they've cut a lot of the programs that allow for different kinds of, let's say, release for the students so that students don't have as much recess time. They don't have as much time for creative outlets and to just let off steam. So
Hmm.
they brought social emotional learning into the classroom. How, what are some things that teachers you believe should start doing as new teachers or even veterans?
Hmm.
What are some things that they should be able to do in the classroom that might actually allow for a release to benefit students and their need just to, let's say, let off a little steam so the
Hmm.
teapot doesn't explode?
Right. For teenagers, nap time. No, I'm joking. They always resist it as kindergartners, but when they get to be teenagers, it's like we can have nap time. There's a lot of things that come to mind. I mean, a lot of teachers love to do active things like we're going to take 5 minutes to do some yoga, or we're going to do some get everybody standing up doing something. It depends a lot on your personality and what you enjoy. I like to just talk to my students at first, just even about anything. It might have been about the ball game last weekend. It might have been about a movie that's coming out. Get their opinions. Have y'all seen such and such? Well, tell me about it. And just get some discussion going about something other than the material. That was kind of my style, and it got students engaged. It got them listening. Also, I think you'll find that if you're looking at it from, and I don't mean to bash administrators by any means, don't get me wrong, but when you're looking at things from administration point of view, they want control. They want students in their seats listening to the teacher, and that's that. And I think some of the classrooms where the most learning is going on is when there's the most activity. So
Right.
sometimes, as a science teacher, I would many times have some kind of little science something ready in the lab area or on a table, even if it was something that I demonstrated. And I would get excited about it. Y'all have got to see this. Even if it didn't directly relate to what I was going to be teaching that day, just something to get them excited and listening and involved and ask questions. Well, why is it? Why does that do that? What do you think? So I think getting them involved in the very beginning of the class, even if it's like I said, talking about a movie, or if it's why do you think this thing happens and that I'm doing this experiment, that's going to take care of a lot of issues and it's get them kind of charged up, for lack of a better word.
I think if they do the hands-on, that helps with some of that
Hmm.
because it can be well, it is interactive, but also it's interpersonal.
Exactly.
Sometimes I like to maybe reserve some time for
Uh-huh.
them to have just a little bit of free time, if
Absolutely.
it's 5 minutes or even if it's 10 minutes, and maybe they can play a card game. Maybe they're playing Jenga, but they
Right.
have to clean everything up or else they lose that privilege. They could even
Absolutely.
take a nap if they want. They can listen on their
Yeah.
phones. They can do whatever. So part of it is because I don't know that students are really good at relating to each other anymore.
Well, yeah, because they're used to doing that on a computer screen more than sitting across from each other.
Right. So the more interactions they can have with each other, the better. And you can tell who are the ones that are a little more socially awkward because they're the ones who will not interact with anybody else.
Right.
And it's that then becomes kind of your mission to figure out a way to ease them in so that they can become part of the fabric rather than sort of like the little fringe.
Exactly. I think that I used to do some of what you're talking about and kind of would sneak it in, make it look like I needed some time. I would say, okay, I'm going to need to change this PowerPoint if I'm using a PowerPoint, or I need to erase this off the board and I need to write something up. So y'all take about 5 minutes and just chill, and it would be, and they would sit and talk to each other or whatever. And that would kind of be, I would do that on purpose. They didn't realize I was saying, hey, I'm going to give y'all a little downtime here. I would make it like, hey, I need some time to do this. And then they would just sit and talk, or you're going to get one or two come up and can I go get some water and go to the bathroom? Well, some of that. And you got to do it per class and know
Right.
how much time you can give people. But yes, giving them a little break. And it depends too on your classroom situation. When I first started teaching, we had 55-minute classes. But then later on in my career, we went to 90-minute classes. Well, 90-minute classes are tough for any of us, and students only have what they say maybe 15 minutes at the best of attention span. So I would have things designed so that about at least every 20 minutes we would switch gears and do something, get them up out of their seats doing something. That was a goal, and then I'd figure out later what is that something going to be. But that was my goal. And then about halfway through, that's what I would come up with an excuse to say, okay, y'all give me about 5 minutes to get this ready. Y'all just sit and talk. And I never had any trouble with that. They loved it.
What about the advice that they use for new teachers, which is never turn your back on your students?
Well, I know what they mean by that, but I'll be honest with you. I was advising a new teacher just last week at the place where I'm teaching now, and she wanted me to watch her for a little while, and she had this tendency. Now we're talking about they're teaching adults, so the reason was different, but she had a tendency to turn toward the blackboard and write, or the whiteboard, I guess, and write and talk to the board. And I would tell her, no, you write something and you turn and face the students. because number one, they can't necessarily hear you, and you can get eye contact. I gave them all those reasons. I don't think that a teacher needs to be looking at their students like they're a suspect. They think they're gonna uh, throw something at them or whatever, unless of course they do. We probably all, if you talk long enough, you've had something thrown across the room. I think the fun, a quick little funny on that was we had a television up in the corner where they would occasionally the administration would show things, whatever. And I would turn and writing something on the board when the students were maybe taking a test. And I could look up into that television screen. It was like a mirror, and I could see the class. And so all I had to do without turning around, I'd say, Johnny, keep your eyes on your own paper. And they, how did he know that? They didn't realize I was looking in the, I was looking in the TV screen, and I could see everything they were doing. The philosophy behind that is kind of negative in that the student, you're automatically assuming the students are going to be bad. Another one that's famous is don't smile until Thanksgiving. I've heard people say, don't. It's easier to loosen up than it is to tighten up. So you could take that, and I think it has a lot to do with the classes you teach, and it doesn't take long to figure that out. I've had classes in high school where a lot of them were literally criminals, you know, and you had to handle that a little more with kid gloves, so to speak.
The funny thing is that if you look at, because you can't think of them as criminals,
No, no, of course not.
but
Except some of them had felonies, but
right. Well, I used to teach felons,
yes,
and they were the they were the most fun students I've ever had. And
absolutely.
so with them, I had to be careful because I would forget where I would put my coffee mug.
Yeah,
And then I'd say, "Where's my coffee mug?" And they would all just look at me with these blank stares and they'd say, you haven't had coffee yet today." So they would start to gaslight me.
oh
So
yeah.
I'd get out another one and I would pour it. And
Hmm.
pretty soon I would walk around and I'd say, "Where'd this coffee mug come from? How'd that happen?" And they just had the best time with it. And
Oh, absolutely.
so, and you know, a, if you have a sense of humor and you can
Mhm.
play with them,
Exactly,
because
exactly.
some of them have never learned how to interact with adults
Hmm.
except for, and it's going to sound very Nietzsche-esque, but master slave kind of
Yeah.
thing where somebody is always domineering over them and
Hmm.
telling them what to do rather
Okay.
than working with them. So, on that point, how important is it for a teacher to be a dominant force rather than a mentor?
I think it's the dominant force shouldn't be apparent. I mean, it is true that they need to know that you are the one in charge, but that can be taken many, many ways. It doesn't mean that you have to, like you said, be domineering to be
Hmm.
the dominant force. I used to, in a lot of students, especially like the ones we were talking about, some that are known for troublemaking, so to speak. I used to let them know that I thought they were important. Find something about them, talk to them, find something that they were good at, and ask them things. For instance, I might have a fella who was really good at fixing cars. Okay. And so I would find a reason to say, hey, Johnny, my car's been doing blah 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 blah. What do you think that is? And then he would give me all this. Oh well, I'm going to check into that. Just a little discussion to where, or give them something in the classroom to do. Like, hey, could you? You're pretty good with your hands. Could you go fix such and such for me, or whatever it might be? Find a strength and play on that strength, and they will then realize you respect them. And that's what it goes, what we started off the discussion with, respect. They're not necessarily used to that. They're used to somebody always telling them what they're doing wrong and what they have to be doing, and not coming to them for help. And I would sometimes go to them, hey, could you advise me on this? Could you help me on that? And then that changes the equation tremendously.
I'm getting the thread all the way through about the relationship that you build with the students.
Absolutely. Hmm.
And some teachers have a really difficult time. Maybe it's not just teachers, but when they come in, and I remember when I was beginning to work with my young felons, I
Hmm.
stood there and I looked at them and I
Right.
looked at them and I said, "Okay, I'm going to make a deal with you. I'm not going to judge you, but don't you dare judge me until we get to know each other. So let's
Right.
build this together." And I found that that was actually very effective in teaching all students
Hmm.
because nobody wants to feel as though they're being judged.
No, absolutely.
And and jumping to conclusions about people takes much longer for them to change their mind.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. And I think too, I like to use the term that students need to feel emotionally safe. You know,
yes.
we concentrate nowadays so much on physical safety, which we should, of course. But students, what I've told, especially teaching biology and tied in, was when any of us walk into a room, immediately our subconscious is checking the room just to make sure everything's safe. We don't realize we're doing it, but our sympathetic nervous system is checking, say, hey, is this a place I want to be? And so I want students to feel when they see me, when they walk in my room, they know that within certain reasons they can say what they want to say, and they're not gonna be have their head bitten off. I'm not gonna bark at them, even if we don't always agree with something. And they just need to feel safe in that, and then they're gonna open up. So
Right. So, what do you think are the most important pieces of teacher training that are ignored largely by the institutions that are training teachers?
I think that in that same idea, one is this is just things that I have found out working with people right out of college or in college. One is sounds simple, but it's teacher presentation, voice quality, eye contact, body language. All of this is communication. So how you communicate, if you don't communicate correctly to the student, and that's not just material, but that's your own feelings, your respect. You could tell a student, hey, I respect you, but your body language says totally different. So I've often thought that new teachers need to be able, I've told many of the new teachers that teaching is a performance art in a way. Not that you're up there putting on a dog and pony show, as we call it, but you are in front of people. You're trying to keep their attention. So I've often thought that colleges should take just a little bit of time and bring in somebody in the theater arts and just show people about their how to stand, how to walk, how to address people, how to look at their how to look interested, and all of this teacher presentation, I kind of put it under one category. But I think too, schools need to do a better job at having teacher mentors. Sometimes they'll give you a mentor, but yet that mentor is teaching a class while you're teaching a class. If somebody has been teaching for 10 years or better and they're your mentor, they need to have a little release time to come in and be in your classroom with you for one class. So
Mhm.
having a mentor, somebody that you can go to and say, okay, how should I handle this situation? And somebody to give you some ideas and even come in and watch how you handle it. But so these are just a few ideas. I think that also the last thing I'll say is about that is that colleges need to put teachers or prospective teachers in front of classrooms early. I have had situations where the first time that the teacher ever was before students was their senior year in college. Now they've studied education or something like that for 4 years, 3.5 years, and now they're just now getting in front of students, and I've actually had some say, "I don't think I want to do this." you know, I'm about to graduate and I got to find another profession because I don't think I like it. So I think they need to be, their freshman year when they say we're going to be an educator, they need to be put out into a school, if nothing else, just to be a teacher aide for a month. So just.
Right. Just having that practice is so important. And I'm really baffled that they would wait until the
hmm
nth hour to send you off into a classroom.
Right. And that could be changing. Somebody watching this from a university might say, "Hey, we don't do that anymore." Well, but that was the experience I had. Another thing that I would always do with my practice teachers. Now, I'm dating myself here because when I when I was teaching, a lot of the technology we had was colored chalk. That was technology.
Mhm.
But still, nowadays a lot of them have all the smart boards and PowerPoints and you name it, and that's fine. But I would always give my student teachers a marker or a piece of chalk, depending on what I had, and say, for the next 2 weeks, this is all you use. You've got to learn to engage with these students, but you and them, not all the helping learning technologies and all. No, you're going to learn to engage with these students by simply writing on the board when you need to and talking to them. Now, we're talking high school, upper middle school students. That might be different for second grade or something, but they need to first learn to not rely on all the bells and whistles and rely on themselves.
I think that is some of the best advice I've heard for a brand new teacher. And it's not something that I would have considered.
Yeah. Well, that's what I would do. I'd hand them a piece of chalk and say, "This is it." Not that we had a whole lot of different things in that back
Mhm.
then either, but still, and I never had. They would look at me, like deer in the headlights, but but by the time those 2 weeks were up, they were connecting with the students.
Yeah,
And of
and that's
course,
what it's all about.
I would stay in the classroom and I'd give them some alone time with the students, but I'd stay in the classroom and watch and afterwards give them some pointers. A lot of it had to do with presentation. Don't just stand behind that podium and talk or behind that desk. Definitely don't sit down. I mean, I don't think a teacher should ever sit down the entire day unless they're sitting there grading papers or something. When you've got students in there, you're on your feet. But
Right.
you need to be engaging with the students at all times. And the best way to do that is just to jump in the lake and learn to swim. I mean, it's hard to teach that. They have to experience it.
Exactly. So, what more can you say? Because I think you've said so much, and I know that I'm going to go back through this and I'm going to be taking some notes. So, the book is 30
Yes.
Insights for New Teachers to Thrive. And what where can people find it?
Any of the online booksellers. Now, I've had some people contact me and say they called their local bookstores and they were able to order it for them. It's a Roman and Littlefield at the publishers. I have my own website, curtrichards.com. So they could go to curtrichards.com and see the name of it if they forget the name or whatever. But yeah, you can go to, I don't want to plug any one particular thing, but you can go to Amazon, you can go to Goodreads, you can go to barnesandnoble.com, you can go to the whole list and it's there. You can get it in hardback, paperback, or ebook, both. So it's very available. It's been out since March, and I've had some good comments from it, and I would like to hear more. If somebody could, you know, go to my email address is on my webpage, and if they read it or get it, they could drop me a note, and I'd love to respond. I basically just like to say that a thriving teacher, in my opinion, is a lifelong learner. You are a person who loves not only what you teach, you love learning. And what I found I would be doing is no matter what I was doing at home, I might see something, hear something, find something, and I'd think of a way that I could use that in my classroom. That's when you're truly the heart of the teacher. So I would hope that people would go out there, possibly get this book and get something from it. I will add too that the end of the book has got 15, I like to call them humorous stories that are things that has happened in the classroom. And every one of those things has happened to me, even though I wrote them as if they happened to somebody else. But that was something I did throughout my career. I kept a notebook, and I would, when something funny would happen, I would just jot it down and then eventually put it into a book.
And I loved reading those. They made me laugh so hard.
Well, they're very realistic because
Yes,
and every teacher could probably write their own, I'm sure.
exactly. Well, thank you very much,
Well, I've
and the
enjoyed
best
this immensely.
and the best to you. And so that's it for this week, and we will see everybody next week for another episode of Educational Triage. And until then, have a great week. Bye-bye, everybody. Hey, everybody. This is Tony. Thank you so much for watching the video. We've got more coming that go right along with this. So, if you want to know what's next, go ahead, hit that subscribe button. Go ahead, hit that like button because that helps with the algorithm and that's what allows us to do this. So, if you like what you see, share it, subscribe, and join us again when the next videos come. And we do have a catalog growing. So we hope to see more of you. Okay? Thank you.